A broken piece of stone can rewrite our entire history of ancient art. This video reveals the hidden story of collaborative crafting, pieced together from newly analyzed sculpture fragments. You will learn how entire teams of artisans, not lone geniuses, built the iconic statues of antiquity. How did they coordinate their work across vast distances? And what secrets do their tool marks hold about forgotten social structures? What does it mean for a masterpiece to be the work of a community instead of an individual? The true story of ancient art is not found in museum galleries, but in the forgotten corners of old workshops. Picture an archaeologist carefully brushing dust from a seemingly ordinary stone shard, unaware they are holding a key to a lost world. These newly analyzed fragments are the silent witnesses to creation. They are not the polished, perfect statues meant for public display, but the broken pieces, the discarded edges, and the unfinished sections that were never intended to be seen. Their power lies entirely in their flaws. A finished masterpiece conceals its own history, presenting a seamless illusion of singular genius, but a fracture, a chipped edge, or an abandoned rough cut exposes everything. We are looking at chipped marble edges that preserve the exact sequence of different tools, from the rough point to the fine claw chisel. We find terracotta pieces bearing the faint, preserved ridges of a partial fingerprint, pressed into the clay before it hardened. As researcher Aris Mavridis has noted, the break is often more eloquent than the whole. It reveals the internal structure, the hidden workflows, and the raw, unedited reality of the workshop floor. This is the physical evidence that completed artworks were designed to hide. To understand the collaborative spirit of these ancient artisans, we must first learn to read this language of imperfection. It begs the question whose hands exactly left these marks behind. A single limestone fragment becomes a chaotic canvas of creation. Its surface is not a uniform sweep, but a layered history of different chisel widths, overlapping grinding patterns, and grooves that shift in depth and direction. This is the first and most direct evidence emerging from the workshop floors. We are not looking at the work of one pair of hands, but many. Forensic analysis of these marks acts like an archaeological fingerprint, allowing researchers to distinguish between the heavy, assertive strikes of an apprentice roughing out the basic form and the confident, delicate touches of a master carver refining a facial expression or a fold of drapery. The stone itself records this hierarchy of skill. You can almost hear the different rhythms at work, the powerful, repetitive blows that defined the shape, followed by the patient, precise taps that gave it life. On terracotta fragments, this evidence becomes even more intimate. Preserved in the clay are the actual ridges and walls of a fingerprint, pressed into the material before it was fired. This is not just an abstract mark, it is a direct physical connection to an individual who lived thousands of years ago. We are literally touching the hands of the past, and the message is clear. Multiple hands were at work. This variation in pressure and technique points directly to a sophisticated division of labor. It dismantles the romantic idea of a solitary genius struggling alone with a block of marble. These marks are the collective signature of a team, a silent testimony to a shared effort that was carefully organized and executed. So who were these individuals, and how were their specific tasks defined within the creative process? The stone itself holds a passport stamped with the chemical signature of its distant birthplace. Geochemical sourcing, a precise form of analysis, reads this hidden information. It reveals that a block of marble used for a statue in a major city did not come from a local source. Instead, its isotopic fingerprint points directly to a specific quarry on a faraway island. This single fact begins to unravel a much larger story. When fragments from different sculptures discovered in cities separated by vast distances are all traced back to that same quarry, the implication is staggering. It was not a matter of chance. This points to a highly organized and collaborative network of knowledge. Quarrymen deep in the mountains understood which veins of stone were best for carving. Traders and ship captains knew the sea routes to transport these incredibly heavy, valuable blocks. And the master sculptors in urban workshops possessed a deep understanding of how this particular marble from that specific island would respond to their chisels. They all shared a common, specialized language centered on the material itself. The journey of a single block from a mountain quarry to a city square required the coordinated effort of countless individuals, each an expert in their part of a vast chain. This was ancient globalization in action, a system built on shared economic interest and a collective understanding of craft. The logistical coordination alone is difficult to fathom. How did they manage the immense weight and fragility of the stone across such distances? The material itself forces us to expand our view beyond the workshop, to see the entire Mediterranean as a connected landscape of collaboration. This network of moving stone reveals that the very foundation of artistic creation was deeply interdependent. But if the material was sourced through such a complex system, how did the artists themselves communicate their grand designs across this collaborative chain? Hidden beneath the surface of broken marble, a grid of fine, scratched lines tells a story of shared understanding. These are not the marks of freehand artistry, but the ghostly traces of a master plan. On fragments from temple pediments and monumental statues, researchers find precise center points, carefully incised guidelines, and small, measured dots that once acted as a three-dimensional map for the artisans. This was the workshop's shared blueprint, a sacred geometry that enabled true collaboration. Without such a system, the left side of a statue carved by one person would never align with the right side carved by another. The entire sculpture would be a chaotic mess of mismatched scales and clashing styles. But these measured marks provided a common language. They meant that an apprentice roughing out the basic shape of a leg in one corner of the workshop and a master carver refining the delicate features of a face in another were both working from the same invisible grid. They were connected not by constant conversation, but by a shared set of rules. This points to a highly structured environment with a clear hierarchy. Someone, a master planner, first conceived the entire sculpture and translated that vision into a precise set of measurements. This individual understood the overarching design, the sacred proportions that made a figure appear divine or heroic. They then imposed this system onto the raw stone, creating a framework that less experienced hands could follow with confidence. Think of it like a modern architectural blueprint, where electricians, plumbers, and carpenters all follow the same plan to ensure every component fits together in the final building. The standardized system minimized error and guaranteed harmony, turning the work of many into the vision of one. This discovery makes us wonder about that master planner, the invisible mind whose calculations guided every chisel stroke. Who were these individuals, and how did they transmit their complex knowledge across generations of artisans, ensuring these sacred standards survived for centuries? That single, deeply incised line on a marble fragment speaks with the authority of a master. You can see where a master sculptor pressed their tool firmly into the stone, carving a bold, unwavering guide that lesser hands would follow. Beside it, fainter, more hesitant lines trace the same path, the physical evidence of an apprentice learning to match that perfect curve. This is the workshop hierarchy frozen in time. The master was not the one carving every square inch of the statue. Instead, their role was that of a visionary designer and a meticulous coordinator. They began the entire process, first creating a small-scale model, often in clay or wax, to establish the overall composition. Then, on the full-sized block of marble, they would personally incise the most critical lines, the sacred proportions that define the figure's pose and balance. This was the architectural blueprint for the entire team. Once this framework was set, the master would delegate. A senior apprentice with proven skill might be entrusted with carving a detailed hand or a complex fold of drapery. A junior member of the team would be assigned to rough out the large, less detailed areas, like the back of the sculpture or the solid block of the base. You can sometimes see this division of labor on the fragments themselves. A section of a torso might show a beautifully rendered, elegantly curved muscle, executed with a confidence that speaks of deep experience. Just inches away, the work on a simpler, structural part of the stone might be more mechanical, with tool marks that are functional but lack the same refined artistry. The master moved through the workshop, overseeing this entire operation. They were the ultimate quality controller, stepping in to correct a misjudged cut or to add the final, defining touches that brought the stone to life, perhaps the precise curve of a lip or the subtle rendering of an eyelid. This system was a brilliant fusion of mentorship and mass production. It efficiently trained the next generation of artists through direct, hands-on practice, while ensuring that a consistent, high-quality style emanated from the workshop. The master sculptor was less a solitary genius and more the conductor of an orchestra, ensuring every musician played their part in harmony. This practical view of their role inevitably makes us ask, who were the other musicians in this orchestra of creation? A series of drill holes, each one nearly identical and just slightly off perfect, charts a course of patient learning. On a fragment of what was once a decorative border, these small, circular marks form a line. They were not made by the decisive hand of a master, but by the careful, repetitive practice of an apprentice. This is the workshop's classroom, preserved in stone. While the master focused on a statue's expressive face or dramatic pose, a learner would be assigned to the back of the sculpture, to the deep, shadowed folds of drapery, or to the endless repetition of a geometric pattern. These areas were the training grounds, places where a mistake could be corrected or even incorporated without ruining the entire piece. You can see the progression in the tool marks themselves. On one fragment, a series of chisel strikes might be uneven, with one cut biting too deep into the marble and the next too shallow. On another piece, perhaps from a later period in the same workshop, the strikes from a similar tool show a newfound control and rhythm. It is possible we are seeing the same individual hand improving over months or even years of dedicated work. This was not haphazard labor. It was a formalized, embedded system of education. The very act of production was also the act of teaching. An apprentice learned by doing, by feeling the stone resist and then yield to the chisel, by observing how the master solved a difficult problem of anatomy or composition. This collaborative craft was, by its nature, a collaborative learning environment. It ensured that hard-won technical knowledge, the secrets of proportion, and the feel for different materials did not die with one person but were passed down, refined, and expanded with each new generation. The presence of this learning hand is the ultimate proof of a vibrant, living workshop ecosystem. It forces us to look past the single famous name and acknowledge the many unnamed hands that built our classical ideal of beauty. This intricate system of mentorship and specialized labor inevitably leads us to wonder about the other, even more specific roles that made such a complex operation possible. A fragment of marble shows a surface alive with a cascade of carved curls, each spiral and wave executed with a breathtaking, repetitive precision. This is not the work of a generalist, but the signature of a specialist, an artisan whose entire focus was the rendering of hair. Evidence from these broken pieces reveals a workshop structure built on hyper-specialized skill. One individual might have been celebrated for their ability to carve eyes that held a lifelike spark, another for rendering the powerful, tense musculature of a horse or lion, and still another for incising flawless, elegant inscriptions into stone. When we find a fragment covered exclusively in intricate textural patterns, like scales or the delicate weave of lace like drapery, we are likely looking at the isolated work of such an expert. These specialists were the secret weapons of the master sculptor. They were not tied to a single statue from start to finish. Instead, they would move through the workshop, called upon to contribute their specific, perfected skill to multiple projects. A sculptor renowned for dynamic drapery might add the flowing robe to one figure, then move to another to carve the same complex folds, ensuring a consistent and masterful treatment of cloth across all the workshop's output. This system represents an ancient form of artistic assembly, but one directed toward beauty rather than mere production. It was a structure that recognized individual excellence, yet channeled it entirely toward a collective goal. This level of organization suggests a workshop that functioned more like a modern creative agency, with a roster of talent, each contributing their unique expertise. How did the master planner ensure that all these distinct contributions, from the hair specialist to the animal carver, blended into a single, harmonious whole without a single visible seam? A discarded marble shoulder bears the ghost of a failed union. Its surface is smooth and perfectly sculpted, except for a single, cleanly drilled hole that leads nowhere. This socket was meant to receive a connecting pin from an arm, but the arm never arrived, or perhaps it arrived and did not fit. This fragment is a testament to the immense challenge of the final, collaborative act assembly. To create statues on a grand scale, artisans regularly carved them in separate parts, a head from one block of marble, a torso from another, and limbs from yet others. The true test of the workshop's collective skill was not just in the carving, but in the joining. We find the evidence in these broken connection points, surfaces marked with precise dowel holes, slots for metal clamps, and the faint, crystalline residue of ancient adhesive. Each of these features required a different pair of hands to work in perfect concert. The artisan carving the arm had to understand the exact dimensions and angles of the socket being prepared by the artisan carving the torso, often while working on separate pieces of stone that they might never see together until the final, dramatic moment of assembly. This was collaborative engineering on a millimeter scale, long before the word engineering existed. A miscalculation of a fraction of an inch by one person would render weeks of work by another completely useless, resulting in a beautiful but disconnected arm that could never embrace its body. The pressure to achieve this seamless fit must have been immense, a silent conversation of measurements and trust passing between the specialists. The process transforms our image of classical sculpture from a solid, singular object into a magnificent three-dimensional puzzle. Each piece, carved by a different expert, was a solution to a distinct part of the artistic problem. The final act of putting them together was the moment of truth, where the collective vision of the master planner and the specialized skills of the entire team were physically unified. How did they achieve this stunning precision without modern tools? And what happened in that final, climactic stage when all the separately created pieces were brought together for the first time? A smooth, polished shoulder fragment rests beside a rough, unfinished back, telling the story of two different hands in the final act of creation. The assembly of the statue was not the end of the road. The collaborative process continued, shifting from the heavy work of carving to the delicate arts of surface finishing. One remarkable piece of evidence is a single fragment that shows two distinct histories on its opposite sides. On one face, you find the microscopic, parallel scratches left by fine abrasives, the work of a polisher who patiently rubbed the stone with emery or pumice to achieve a specific, desired luster. The surface feels almost liquid to the touch, a testament to hours of dedicated labor. Flip the fragment over, and you discover a completely different story. Here, trapped in the stone's tiny pores, are microscopic traces of pigment, the ghost of a vibrant color applied after the polishing was complete. This tiny shard encapsulates the final, essential partnership, the collaboration between the form givers and the color givers. The polishers had to understand the sculptor's work intimately. Their job was to enhance the play of light across a carved muscle or a fold of drapery, not to erase the subtle textures left by the chisels. They worked to reveal the stone's inner light, preparing a perfect canvas for the next group of artists. Then the painters arrived, their work a specialized science in itself. Analysis of paint residues shows complex layering techniques, with different primers and binders mixed with mineral-based pigments. Achieving a durable, brilliant blue or a shimmering gold leaf required a deep, chemical understanding of materials that was entirely separate from the skill of carving stone. These individuals were masters of color and chemistry, not form and mass. They had to work in harmony with the underlying sculpture, using their brushes to accentuate depth, define contours, and bring a lifelike warmth to the cold marble. A painted eye would seem to see, a painted lip would seem to speak. This final phase completely shatters our modern perception of pure white classical statues. The finished object was a riot of color and texture, a complete sensory experience meant to dazzle the viewer. It was the product of a seamless collaboration across two distinct artistic disciplines, blending the grand tradition of sculpture with the vibrant tradition of painting into one unified, breathtaking whole. What cultural imperative, what shared belief about beauty and divinity demanded such an elaborate and cooperative effort from so many different kinds of artisans? The ghost of the workshop is not found in its walls, but in the patterns left on its floor. Archaeologists meticulously map the scatter of stone chips, the concentrated piles of marble dust, and the worn-down tools discarded in specific corners. From this debris, a blueprint for collaboration emerges. The space was not a chaotic studio, it was a factory for beauty, intelligently designed to guide a statue from a raw block to a polished, painted marvel. In one clearly defined area, we find the heaviest, coarsest stone flakes, the evidence of the initial, brutal work of roughing out the basic form. This was the domain of powerful strikes and large tools. Just a few meters away, the debris changes dramatically. Here, the stone dust is finer, mixed with the tiny, delicate slivers from fine clawed chisels and drills. This was the station for detailed carving, for faces and fingers and flowing hair. And in another distinct zone, often separated for practical reasons, researchers find the residues of a different craft entirely, the mineral traces of pigments and the ceramic pots that held them, the domain of the painters. This spatial logic was a form of silent management. The physical journey of the sculpture through the workshop mirrored its artistic progression. An apprentice would not need verbal instruction to know where to take a block for its initial shaping. The very layout of the space directed their movement. This arrangement forced a constant, organic interaction. The master, positioned centrally, had a clear sightline to every stage of the process. A specialist carver, needing to understand the exact angle of a shoulder being roughed out, could simply walk over to that area and see the work in progress. The workshop was a choreographed environment where the flow of people and the evolving artwork were perfectly synchronized. This was more than mere efficiency. It was a physical manifestation of a shared cultural principle that great creations are born from a community working in rhythm. The very architecture of their workplace was built to foster the seamless handoff of responsibility, ensuring that every specialized hand knew its place in the collective dance of creation. The surface of a broken marble hand reveals more than just tool marks. It carries a faint, painted symbol near the wrist, a sign not of the artist but of the divine. This small detail opens a window into the deepest motivation for collaboration. The creation of a temple statue was never merely an artistic project, it was a spiritual undertaking. The entire process, from quarrying the stone to applying the final touches of paint, was often framed by ritual. We find fragments inscribed with prayers or the names of deities, applied by priests who oversaw the work. These religious figures were essential collaborators, consecrating the raw material, blessing key stages of the carving, and finally performing the ceremony that was believed to breathe life into the finished statue. In this worldview, the workshop was not a factory, it was a sacred precinct. The labor of many hands was not just efficient, it was pious. A collective offering drawn from the entire community of craftsmen was considered more pleasing to the gods than the work of any single individual, no matter how gifted. This cultural framework transformed the very meaning of their work. The pressure to carve a perfect curve was not only about aesthetics, it was an act of devotion. The careful joining of two pieces was a symbolic act of unity. This spiritual imperative for collaboration appears across different ancient cultures. In Egypt, the creation of a pharaoh's statue involved rituals that linked the work to cosmic order. In Mesopotamia, the eyes of a cult statue were often opened in a special ceremony, believed to grant it perception. The fragments we study are therefore more than technical artifacts. They are physical remnants of a collective prayer, a testament to a society that saw shared purpose as a sacred duty. This profound cultural driver ensured that the system of collaboration was not just a practical choice, but a deeply rooted tradition, passed down through generations as a fundamental part of their identity. A fragment from a Greek kouros and a shard from an Egyptian colossus lie side by side, telling two completely different stories of collaboration. The Greek piece, often marble, bears the marks of a system chasing an ideal. You see the clear hierarchy, the master's guiding lines followed by the varied execution of apprentices, all striving for that perfect, godlike human form. There is room for individual flair, a slight variation in how a knee is rendered or hair is textured, suggesting that within the workshop, personal style was a valued currency. Now look at the Egyptian fragment, frequently carved from brutal granite or quartzite. Its surface speaks of a different priority, absolute adherence to a timeless canon. The tool marks are less about individual expression and more about overcoming immense physical challenge. They reveal techniques perfected for extreme hardness, a specialized knowledge so precise it was likely guarded within closed hereditary guilds. This was collaboration on a colossal scale, both in the size of the statues and the teams that built them. Where a Greek workshop might be a master with a handful of learners, an Egyptian project resembled a military operation with overseers, specialized stone carvers, and countless laborers, all moving in lockstep to a sacred blueprint that had been fixed for centuries. One system fostered innovation within a tradition, the other guaranteed permanence and perfect repetition. This stark contrast proves there was no single formula for ancient collaboration. The very structure of creative labor was a direct reflection of cultural DNA. For the Greeks, the goal was the idealized individual, and their workshops mirrored this pursuit. For the Egyptians, the goal was the eternal order of the cosmos, and their production lines were built to mirror that unshakable stability. The stones themselves ask us to reconsider what we mean by creativity, forcing us to see that it can flourish just as powerfully within a framework of strict rules as it can in a pursuit of personal genius. That single discarded fragment is more than just broken stone. It is a line item in an ancient budget. The collaborative workshop was not merely an artistic choice, it was an economic necessity. Producing a large-scale statue required a staggering investment in raw materials, from the marble block itself to the bronze for tools and the precious pigments for paint. This was not a hobby, it was a high-stakes business venture. A fragment from a public monument represents a binding contract, a strict deadline from a city council or a wealthy patron, and a meticulously calculated budget that could not be exceeded. The master sculptor was not just an artist, he was an entrepreneur. His workshop was a small business, and its collaborative structure was the most efficient engine for survival and profit. By maintaining a team of specialists, the workshop could take on multiple commissions at once. While one team roughed out a new civic statue, another could be applying the final polish to a funerary marker, and the painting specialists could be moving between both projects. This parallel workflow maximized output and income, turning the workshop into a reliable, profitable enterprise. We can sometimes see this economic pressure frozen in the fragments themselves. A series of nearly identical decorative leaves, carved with the same quick, efficient drill technique, might appear on fragments from two different statues commissioned for different clients. This was a standardized element, a time-saving shortcut that allowed the workshop to deliver complex ornamentation without the cost of reinventing every single detail. The workshop's survival depended on this clever balance between unique artistry and reproducible efficiency. The artisans were not just creators of beauty, they were skilled managers of time, material, and human resources. Their collaborative process was the practical, ingenious solution that allowed great art to be produced at a scale that met the immense demand of their society. A novel set of parallel grooves on a marble fragment tells a silent story of a tool that changed everything. These newly analyzed pieces are revealing that workshops were not just places of artistic training, they were vibrant hubs of technological invention. The evidence is etched into the stone itself, a specific, advanced drill mark that suddenly appears on sculptures from two distant cities within a single generation. This is not a coincidence, it is the physical trace of a conversation between artisans. A master carver, perhaps traveling for a major commission, would have brought his most effective tools and techniques with him. In the shared space of a new workshop, local apprentices would have seen this new drill bit in action, marveling at how it could carve a perfect, deep channel with less effort and greater speed. The knowledge was not locked away in a scroll, it was passed from hand to hand, demonstrated on a spare piece of stone, and then replicated. This was how innovation traveled, through the direct personal collaboration of craftsmen. The fragments act as a kind of ancient patent office, recording the rapid adoption of a superior method. An improved levering system for positioning massive blocks, a new abrasive paste that created a finer polish, even a novel recipe for an adhesive. These were the trade secrets that gave a workshop its competitive edge. Yet they were secrets that could not be fully contained. They leaked out with every journey an artisan took, with every shared meal between workshops, with every curious glance at a neighbor's toolkit. This constant, informal exchange meant that technological progress was a collective achievement. An apprentice learned far more than an artistic style. They were immersed in the latest engineering of their day, learning to solve practical problems with the most advanced thinking available. The collaborative environment was a living library of technique, where the most valuable books were the calloused hands of the masters and the experiments of their peers. This relentless flow of practical ideas, preserved in the minute details of broken stone, forces a profound shift in our perspective. We must see these workshops not as static museums of tradition, but as dynamic, buzzing centers of research and development. And in considering this river of shared knowledge, we are left to wonder about the individual minds who first conceived these brilliant tools, their personal identities forever dissolved into the collaborative whole. Our search for a single signature on a masterpiece is destined for disappointment. These fragments present us with a beautiful and frustrating paradox. They offer undeniable proof that many hands built our classical ideals, yet they almost never tell us the names of those individuals. Through painstaking analysis, we can sometimes identify a recurring style, a particular way of carving an eye or a fold, and label this as the work of Master A. We can trace the influence of a specific workshop, perhaps one in Athens or Corinth, and call it Workshop B. But the confident strike of the senior apprentice and the hesitant first cut of the learner are anonymized by the collective. They are the voices in a choir whose individual names are lost to history. This system challenges our modern obsession with the singular artistic genius, the lone creator whose name alone can define an era. The fragments ask us to unlearn this. They push us to appreciate the artwork not as the product of one mind, but as a communal achievement where the group's success in fulfilling a sacred or civic duty was infinitely more important than any individual's fame. This is a profound shift in perspective, to look upon a Greek statue and see not the shadow of a famous name like Phidias, but the ghost of an entire community, is to connect with the ancient world on a much deeper, more human level. It allows us to value the process, the shared knowledge, and the social bonds that made the art possible. Embracing this collective anonymity is not a loss but a gain. It is our invitation to hear the true, multi-throated chorus of the past. The Parthenon marbles offer a textbook written in stone. When we examine broken pieces from the friezes and metopes, the sheer variation in craftsmanship is impossible to ignore. On a single narrative panel depicting a procession, you can find the work of a true master adjacent to the less refined efforts of a learning hand. One figure's drapery flows with liquid grace, each fold carved with a confident, fluid motion. Just inches away, the robe of another figure is rendered with more mechanical, hesitant strokes. This was not a project carved by a single genius over a lifetime. This was a monumental, state-sponsored effort, a race against time to complete the temple's decoration. The evidence points to a large team of sculptors, all working at once, each assigned a specific section of the grand story. The pressure to finish meant that the master planners had to deploy every available hand, from the most senior specialists to the newest apprentices, trusting in the shared system of guidelines and proportions to ensure the final product achieved visual harmony. Some fragments tell an even more dynamic story, one of on-the-fly problem-solving. A piece of a horse's leg shows a section that was clearly broken during carving, then expertly repaired with a marble patch and adhesive. This was not a hidden flaw, but a visible testament to the collaborative spirit. A mistake was made, and the team worked together to fix it, ensuring the overall vision remained intact. This level of quality control on such a massive scale is staggering. The Parthenon was not just a building, it was a national symbol, and its creation required the blended skills of countless individuals, their individual contributions seamlessly woven into a single, powerful statement. This case study transforms our theoretical understanding into something tangible. We are not just imagining a collaborative workshop, we are holding the proof in our hands, seeing the very strokes that built a civilization's dream. These faint whispers from the workshop floor were almost inaudible until now. The true revolution in our understanding did not begin with the fragments themselves, but with a new way of seeing. Advanced imaging technologies have finally given us the lenses to read this lost language of collaboration. A technique called reflectance transformation imaging, or RTI, works like a kind of computational photography. It captures dozens of images of a single fragment, each lit from a slightly different angle, and then combines them into a single, dynamic digital file. On a screen, you can move a virtual light source across the surface of a seemingly smooth marble shard. Suddenly, what looked blank to the naked eye explodes with information. You see the subtle, parallel grooves left by a specific type of rasp. You can trace the exact path of a single chisel stroke and even infer the handedness of the artisan who held the tool. A left-handed carver would approach the stone at a different angle, leaving a mark that is a mirror image of a right-handed worker. This technology does not just show us marks, it shows us habits, the personal signatures of muscle memory frozen in stone. Three-dimensional laser scanning takes this further, creating a precise digital twin of the fragment. This model can be rotated, measured, and even 3D printed, allowing researchers to study an object from the other side of the world as if they were holding it. Digital microscopy peers into the microscopic world, revealing the crystalline structure of the marble and the tiny, embedded particles of abrasive that were used to polish it. This is not merely better photography, it is a fundamental shift from subjective impression to objective data. We can now quantify the width of a chisel mark, measure the depth of a drill hole, and statistically compare these measurements across thousands of fragments from different workshops and time periods. This turns a solitary broken piece into a single data point in a vast collective story. The imaging process itself feels like a form of modern collaboration, a partnership between the human eye and the machine's precision, working in concert to recover a truth that has been waiting in plain sight for millennia. Every scratch and groove becomes a word in a sentence, and these new technologies have finally given us the dictionary. A single chisel mark can be read in two completely different ways. While the evidence for collaborative workshops is compelling, the fragments do not speak with one unanimous voice, and this has sparked a vital, ongoing debate among researchers. One school of thought suggests we might be overinterpreting the variety of tool marks. A highly skilled, individual sculptor would have used a whole arsenal of tools, from heavy points for rough work to fine drills for intricate details. The changing rhythms in the stone could simply chart the logical progression of one artist's process, not the entrance of different hands. This perspective challenges the very foundation of the collaborative model, urging caution against reading a team into what might be the versatile signature of a lone master. Further skepticism questions the scale of specialization. Could one remarkably talented individual truly master the carving of dynamic drapery, the rendering of lifelike eyes, and the sculpting of powerful animal forms? Some experts argue that while specialties existed, the average sculptor in a successful workshop was likely a profound generalist, capable of executing most parts of a statue with equal skill. The variations we see might reflect the natural ebb and flow of any creative process, not the rigid boundaries of assigned tasks. These debates are not mere academic exercises. They are the engine of scientific progress, forcing archaeologists to return to the fragments with ever more refined questions and sophisticated technologies. The discussion pushes the entire field toward greater rigor. This intellectual friction reveals a beautiful truth about history itself. The past is not a locked room of settled facts, but a living, breathing conversation across centuries. The silent, broken marble holds no inherent story. It is our interpretation, shaped by our own time and our relentless curiosity, that gives it a voice. That voice changes as we learn to listen more carefully. The current fervent discussion around collaborative crafting is not a sign of weakness in the theory, but a testament to its power. It has placed the anonymous artisan, the structure of the workshop, and the very nature of ancient creativity at the center of a dynamic and evolving dialogue, ensuring that these long silent stones continue to challenge and inspire us. The rhythmic tap of a hammer on a chisel sets the morning's tempo, a steady percussion beneath the rising sun. A fine cloud of marble dust hangs in the air, catching the light as it drifts across a bustling courtyard. This is not a quiet sanctuary for a lone genius, but a vibrant, noisy workshop, a hive of coordinated activity. At the center of it all, the master sculptor moves with a quiet authority. He pauses before the emerging form of a kuros, his eyes tracing the lines of a thigh. His hand reaches out not to take a tool, but to guide the hand of a young apprentice, showing the exact angle needed to deepen a muscle curve without fracturing the stone. A few steps away, he nods in silent approval at a senior carver who is bringing a stone hand to life, the fingers seeming to curl gently in the morning light. The space is organized chaos. In one shaded corner, a team grinds minerals with a mortar and pestle, creating vibrant powders that will become the statue's skin and robes. Their conversation is a low murmur about the consistency of the binder. Nearby, other artisans are focused on the practical magic of assembly, dry fitting a newly carved arm into its socket on a torso, checking the alignment of the hidden dowel holes with intense concentration. The ground is littered with the physical evidence of this process, a carpet of stone shards and discarded trial pieces. Each fragment is a silent byproduct of the day's work, a mistake that taught a lesson or a test cut that perfected a technique. This reconstructed scene, built from the cumulative whispers of countless broken pieces, does more than inform us, it transports us. It replaces the myth of the solitary artist with the palpable, messy, and profoundly human reality of shared creation. You can almost feel the grit on the air and hear the low, focused chatter of a community building beauty together, one careful strike at a time. A master's name might be carved in history, but the fingerprints on a terracotta fragment belong to someone history never named. These newly analyzed pieces, when combined with inscriptions on tombstones and workshop reliefs, paint a surprisingly detailed portrait of the collaborative artisan's life. The master sculptor could indeed achieve a form of celebrity, his name recorded on contracts and his wealth allowing for a fine house. Yet for the vast majority of hands in the workshop, social standing was built on a different foundation, that of skilled, respected trade. They were not anonymous drones, but nor were they part of the ruling elite. They occupied a crucial middle ground in the ancient economy, their status firmly above the day laborer who moved earth and stone, yet distinctly below the wealthy citizen who commissioned their work. Their value was their knowledge, the hard-won skill in their hands that transformed raw material into objects of power and beauty. This professional identity was everything. Their collaboration was not just a method for creating art, it was the very structure of their social world. The workshop was a community, a place where they ate, learned, argued, and forged bonds that likely extended beyond its walls. We see this guild-like identity in the way they organized themselves, in the shared symbols found on their personal seals, and in the collective tombs where fellow craftsmen were laid to rest. This sense of belonging, of being part of a proud tradition larger than any one person, fueled the quality of their work. When you look at a fragment where the drill work is perfectly spaced, or a join is flawlessly executed, you are not looking at the work of a forced laborer. You are seeing the pride of a professional who knew their contribution mattered to the whole. This understanding transforms these anonymous makers from faceless cogs in a machine into what they truly were, skilled individuals who found their purpose and their place within a collective. The silent workshop of an ancient sculptor and the bustling studio of a modern film director are separated by millennia, yet they hum with the same essential rhythm. We often celebrate the singular creative genius, the star architect whose name defines a building, or the artist whose solitary vision captivates the world. But these ancient fragments present a different, more enduring model for creation. They demonstrate that true, lasting greatness is rarely a solo performance. It is most often a team sport. This is not a historical curiosity. It is a timeless principle that resonates powerfully in our own era. Look at the credits of any major film, a sprawling list of names that mirrors the ancient workshop with stunning precision. You have the director, the modern equivalent of the master planner, holding the overarching vision. Then come the specialists, the experts in cinematography, sound design, costume, and visual effects. Each one a direct parallel to the ancient artisan who mastered only eyes or drapery or inscriptions. They all work from a shared blueprint, the script and storyboards, which function just like the measured guidelines incised on marble. The goal is the same, to blend hundreds of individual contributions into a single, seamless artistic experience that feels as if it sprang from one mind. The same collaborative engine drives video game development, where programmers, artists, writers, and designers operate in a coordinated dance, and scientific research, where teams of researchers build upon each other's findings to solve problems no single person could tackle alone. The ancient world understood that a clear hierarchy was not about stifling creativity, but about enabling it. It provided structure for mentorship, allowing experienced masters to pass hard-won knowledge to the next generation, ensuring that skills and standards did not vanish. It allowed for the integration of wildly different talents, where the logical mind of an engineer and the intuitive hand of a painter could both find a place in service of a shared vision. This historical perspective challenges the myth of the lone genius and offers a more sustainable and perhaps more humane model for modern creation. It suggests that our greatest achievements may not come from isolated brilliance, but from our ability to build communities of practice where trust, shared language, and a common purpose unite many hands in a single, extraordinary effort. The story whispered by these stone fragments is only just beginning to be heard. The most profound chapters in our understanding of collaborative crafting are still being written, powered by a new generation of analytical tools. Artificial intelligence is poised to become the ultimate research assistant, capable of scanning thousands of digital fragment models to detect patterns invisible to the human eye. An AI could be trained to recognize the subtle, consistent quirks of a specific workshop, a unique way of finishing a chisel stroke or a preference for a particular drill angle. This would allow us to identify a workshop's signature style as clearly as we recognize handwriting, tracing the movement of artisans and ideas across the ancient world with unprecedented precision. At an even more intimate scale, chemical analysis is becoming so sensitive it can detect the ghost of a single recipe. We will soon be able to analyze microscopic residues trapped in the stone's pores, not just to confirm the presence of paint, but to identify the exact organic binders used, like ancient egg tempera or plant-based gums. This would reveal the painter's secret formulas, the specific local ingredients they mixed to make their colors adhere and shine. Each new excavation adds more pieces to this grand collaborative puzzle. The ultimate goal is a breathtaking shift in resolution. We are moving from understanding collaboration as a broad, impersonal system to reconstructing the vibrant biographies of individual workshops. We could trace the career of a single master carver as their style evolved over decades, or identify the moment a talented apprentice graduated to become a specialist in their own right. This research promises to give names and stories back to the anonymous hands that shaped our world, transforming silent stone into a chorus of rediscovered lives. These fragments have done far more than fill museum shelves. They have rewritten the very story of ancient art. The evidence they present is undeniable, shifting our focus from the pedestal of a solitary genius to the vibrant, bustling floor of the collaborative workshop. We now see a world where master designers, skilled specialists, and learning apprentices worked in a carefully orchestrated symphony to create the marvels we still admire today. This is a richer, more human story, one built on community, the sharing of hard-won knowledge, and the profound power of a collective goal. The next time you stand before an ancient statue, try to see past the silent, polished surface. Remember that you are not looking at the work of one person, but of many. You are witnessing a symphony in stone, composed by a master planner and brought to life by a chorus of dedicated hands, each contributing their unique note to an enduring masterpiece. Let this ancient model of shared creation inspire you to consider the power of collaboration in your own world, in the projects you undertake and the communities you build. If this journey into the collaborative secrets of the past has enlightened you, please subscribe for more mysteries unveiled. We would love to hear your thoughts on these discoveries in the comments below.